angry. What happened? What threatened my home, my comfort, my structure? What did that? And there is going to be built up anger. It's going to happen. You're going to be angry either at the person. There's going to be some sort of resentment that's building up because something changed and I don't like it. I liked what was comfortable. My parents, I liked hugs. I liked pancakes. And I'm not saying those things are gone, but there is something that had threatened it. And there's going to be anger that builds up out of that.
My friend, Dr. Frank Scott, I think you know Dr. Scott, told me that in his work with children in the counseling centers over the years that he often sees that anger aimed at the parent that the kid still lives with as opposed to the other.
Exactly. And that can be just retargeting what the anger is or building it up that you drove that person away. But it's normal in families to lash out at that person closest to you, and especially with what's building up.
Because that's where you feel safe.
Exactly.
Like if I show my anger toward dad who left or mom who left, she or he may not come back, but this one's here, so I'll just let her have.
Exactly. I'm gonna let you, and that's not necessarily a bad thing because they're opening up to you with their anger. They trust you with their emotions. And we're going to get to this later, but that trust and that emotions to being able to open yourself up and being vulnerable, even in showing anger, is a good thing. Because when they close that off, you're dealing with something very different. And that builds up into something much more dangerous of this hidden anger that's been built up because they don't trust anyone to let it out.
I really want to get to that. So what's the next one? Because I want to hurry up now and get to that. That sounds very interesting. Go ahead.
So after you move on past dealing with anger, it's working out the guilt. So
by the way, if we were numbering these, which number is this?
This is number 5. Number 5 is working out the guilt, and we're going to get to 7 because there's 7.
All right. So we're going to 7. All right. So number 5 is
guilt. So that process of now dealing with the anger and then dealing with that guilt and that internal self-questioning, saying, was this me? Mm-hmm. Was this my fault? And those deep questions can bury that guilt down deep, and that guilt is dangerous.
A couple of years ago, a woman in her 40s. We were talking about this kind of thing. I didn't even know she'd come from a divorced home. She said, even today, I sometimes wonder if it were my fault. Isn't that interesting?
It's powerful, and especially in a child's mind, when they can't comprehend things, they will hold these questions and these seeds of guilt that will grow into these huge, powerful things throughout their lives. And you'll find that seed was planted, that guilt seed was planted way back when they were 6 or 7 or 8, and something hurt them, and it planted that seed of guilt, and that seed of guilt is dangerous. Once it gets those roots down deep, that it was me, why did I do this? That could be something that can change a whole trajectory of a life.
Like how?
Well, I mean, imagine, all right, so I'm 6. I think it's my fault that Dad's gone. Mom doesn't talk to me about it, so now I'm 12 and I'm 13, and I want someone to love me. Why did he leave? Am I worthy of that?
Can I be loved?
Can I be loved?
It's because I ran off this person that's supposed to love me.
Exactly. And then you see frameworks and you see TV shows and all these things that are telling you what you should be having, and you're seeking them. Or, even worse, you're avoiding them, and now you're hiding from anyone who can love you, which is just as dangerous.
Wow. Okay, and what's next?
Yeah, moving on. Number 6. Number 6 is really accepting that permanence. Okay, so this is dysfunction. It's breaking, what I understand is my structure, my home, and you can't leave that child in that wanting stage where they're wanting and doing anything they can, even sacrificing their own life, their livelihood to try to bring things back together. They have to, for their own health, begin to accept things as permanent. And it's not saying things can't be undone, but for the child's health and safety, they need to be able to move on from the situation.
It's kind of interesting, Justin, that some of the things are very similar to the process known as the grief process.
Exactly.
Here, with the anger and the finally having to accept. It's not exactly the same, but it's got some similarities.
But
here.
Yeah, and there are levels of crossover, because you're essentially grieving the loss of a relationship and the loss of a critical, vital relationship. So yes, I would say that there are some several similarities to the grief process.
Sometimes that step you're talking about now, acceptance. Sometimes people. Now, forgive me, because I'm not trying to make it sound like that I have the answers and that I don't like the way that other people say things. But sometimes people will say things such as, well, you need to let go and let God. When I've been told that in my life, I always look at the person and go, what the heck does that mean? I mean, I am a believer in God. I do serve him in my personal life, but I don't even know what that means, let go and let God. Is it really another way of saying?
Accept the permanence and move on? I would say that there are portions, and especially when you have dealt with the situation, you're working through the situation, you have to be able to accept the situations, even some things that you can't change. And especially this, when you're a child, your whole world, and even myself included, I remember for years, I was always concentrating, how do I get my parents back together? Because that to me seemed like the answer to the problems that were happening. And what I wasn't doing was focusing on myself and investing in saying, hey, I need to heal. But instead I was building up this anger, this resentment, because my whole focus was trying to get them back together with everything I could do. And that wasn't my place. And it wasn't something that was healthy for me.
So I'm going to throw a little bit different thing at you now. So let's say the kid is, a teenager and a believer.
Yeah.
That and whatever his or her faith is.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm a Christian. That's the one I normally think about. But let's just say in any of the major religions of the world, or minor for that matter. So here's a believer who expected God to step in and do things. So it's part of the anger toward God, as they understand him, it's part of the acceptance having to be that God's not going to step in and make this different?
Yeah, and that as well is really powerful, and especially when you're looking through even just the research of spiritual development and whatever the major faith may be. There is a component of that to where you are entrusting a spiritual being or a God to help or to save. And then now not only is your structure for life and your structure for home changed, but when you're praying, and speaking from a Western Christian perspective, when you're praying to God, saying, God, bring my parents back together, and you've been praying hard for this to happen, and then now you have to come to the realization, not only your parents not getting together, but God doesn't answer my prayers. Does God not hear me? Does God not love me? So yes, there are some serious connections, especially to your faith.
When I've already mentioned earlier in the program that I divorced Alice back in 1984. Joanna was 6. As I was divorcing her, I overheard her praying one time, and she was saying, God, please make my daddy love my mommy. Now, at that point, I was so convinced that what I was doing was the right thing to do that it had no effect on me that day, or at least none that I admitted. Here it is now, and that was like in 1984. Here it is now, this program being recorded in 2017. That haunts me. And it's like, okay, that's one of the reasons that we do what we do in helping marriages, and the division that we've just started that you are heading up to help children is, wow, I don't say that God's not listening. I believe God is, but God uses people, and part of our motive is, okay, use us. We're going to help these kids in every way we can.
Exactly. And it's that burning concept of saying a child is left alone, asking the question, what about me? And they're asking God the same question. What about me? I loved having my mom and dad together. God, do you not want that? Is it why are you allowing this to happen? And that entering that concept of a young mind that doesn't have a framework of life or faith or community, and now you're asking these life-altering questions, and you're leaving the child with these life-altering questions at a young age.
Now, if you're listening, understand that we don't help kids just who are religious, no matter what their religion is. This is all about helping marriages, helping children, helping everybody, whatever their faith might be or lack of faith might be. We're not, while we, at least I am, and I know that Justin is, we are Christians who serve God, and we never try to hide that. This is not done to try to convert somebody to our faith. This is done because people are hurting, and we want to help them. And so everything we do, and you mentioned it earlier, I'm going to ask you another question about it. Everything we do is based solidly in the social sciences. And so you mentioned earlier that these 7 things came out of some research.
Exactly. And so, and the whole basis of what we're doing, like you're saying, Joe, is to help a child in need. Regardless of what perspective, what faith background, wherever they're coming from, the purpose is to help the child. And the only way that we feel we could really stand on that is behind firm research. And that's why we have a group of researchers that are saying, here is what research is saying. Here is what the research is leading us to be able to help the child in the most efficient and helpful way.
We've got some pretty sharp PhDs working with this.
Yeah, we have a group of about 4 that are working through. They've done everything from the lit reviews to polling and suggesting, doing and developing actually a complete research model for this program.
This is awesome. Now, my PhD is not specifically near children, but I am helping those other 4 as I can based on what I know, but they're the experts on this, not I.
Exactly.
Is there another one?
There is, and this is the 7th stage. This is the stage called risking love,
which is the title of this program. So it's about time we got to that, huh?
Yeah. So we finally got
What does
there.
that mean?
So with risking love, you've gone through these other stages. You really are left with a child saying, I'm seeing something, my impression, my understanding of love, and wow, it didn't work. Look how painful that was.
Love hurts, like that old song. Yeah.
Exactly. Should I risk it? Right?
Say that one more time.
So should I, as the child, after seeing this pain that's all revolved around love, should I risk that? Look at the hurt. Look at what it's done to me. Look at what it's done to them. Why would I ever do that?
How young do you think a kid might be, whether that's being consciously processed or it's just kind of part of what's happening in them? I know we have to guess here,
Yeah.
but how young?
Even something as young as a 2 or a 3-year-old, once they start to begin to understand, okay, this is love, this marriage, and then they start asking, where's dad? Well, because, they're a part of this world. They're going to grow up and they're going to ask these questions saying, wait, Johnny's dad was at Donuts for Dad today at school. Why wasn't mine? And their framework for understanding what is love, it's going to impact them.
It just hit me that attachment styles were actually developed in research with infants, which has to do with that if a child needs your attention, emotional support, and this can happen in a baby, although it's not happening in the same way it does when you're older.
Exactly.
And they need it, and you give it, then they wind up feeling secure in attachment styles. If you give it sporadically, they wind up worried about it.
Exactly.
If you don't give it, they withdraw. It's like, I don't need you. I can live without you. So it's actually can go back even into infancy.
It can, and it absolutely can, especially because that same child is going to grow up with these frameworks for understanding, right? And so when something is withheld or something is not present, the child will intuitively begin to ask, even when they just become cognitively aware or, mentally aware of that, they're going to ask, wait, why didn't someone love me? Am I not worthy of love?
So if it's a baby in arms, the primary caregiver can fulfill that. But when the child finally becomes cognizant of the fact, wait a minute, Mary has 2 adults, Daddy and Mommy. I only have one, and then I might be asking, it's silly, I'm living with my mommy, I'm maybe a 3, 4, or 5 somewhere, and then I'm saying, why don't I have a daddy?
Exactly. And it starts so young. Now, my personal life as well has been interwoven with this. My wife has gone through a divorce, and so I have a stepdaughter, and she is all but 6 now, and she is asking all these questions. Why do I have, why is this? So did my dad not love Mom? What's going on? And she is asking these questions, and she just turned 6. So she is asking these deep-seated questions already. So it doesn't take long for that child to begin to grow to that cognitive state or that mental state to begin to ask, because they're seeing other kids and they're asking, they're comparing their life to the life of those around them.
And so would I be correct to understand here, Justin, that's why we see some teenagers who become very promiscuous because they don't even know what love is. And at least if somebody is touching me, I feel love. All the way to those that are like, I don't need anybody. I'll die alone. I don't ever want anybody around me. So it goes across the extremes here, right?
Exactly. So there is a case of extremes, and especially when you're looking at how important this stage is for let's say this group of children, you have to understand that children understand this love on a term of a spectrum, all the way from the side of where they're saying, hey, I need someone to love me now. Someone, please, however, touch me, love me. And that's just their comprehension, the easiest understanding. And that is largely due to TV, and what you're seeing is, they love each other. There's physical. All the way to the far end of the other spectrum where they're saying, I don't need it. I don't want it. It's just hurt. I don't want anything to do with love. And both of those are just as dangerous.
All right. So if I'm a mom or a dad, even an uncle or aunt, grandpa, grandma listening to this, or even if I'm a kid, now it's kind of coming from both, if you can help me with that. So how do we help kids? And all of these 7 things are crucial. I understand that. But because we're in the month of February right now, as we record this, and it's the, quote, love month, end quote, tell me, in context of risking love, what do people need to know?
Got it. So especially when the parent, the guardian, the caregiver is there, one, you have to understand that these are 7 stages. They're not necessarily in order. Nothing works in a perfect framework, and people are coming from different perspectives.
And it could even be 3 steps forward, 2 steps back.
Exactly. And it's one, you have to have this understanding. So when the child is like angry, or they're lashing out, or they're reclusive, or they're hiding away, you have to understand it in this context. Because if you don't, you're going to lose. You're going to be angry at the child. Like, why are you being angry? You know your dad's gone. Why are you being angry? And so that knowledge in and of itself is power. And it's especially powerful when you're the caregiver or when you're the parent, because that child they're dealing with something that they don't comprehend and they don't understand. But you, as the adult or the parent, have to be able to have that